All right, let me start by saying that life with Karen was like a well-oiled machine. You know, the kind where you don't even have to think about it anymore? That's how we were. We had our routines down to a science. Every morning, I'd make her coffee while she got ready for work. She'd kiss me on the cheek and say something sweet like, "Don't forget to water the plants," or "Remember to pick up milk on your way home." It was cute, in a nauseatingly domestic kind of way. I worked as a software engineer at this tech startup. It was a grind, but I loved it. My job was all about solving puzzles, making things run smoothly. Karen, on the other hand, was a high school English teacher. She had this way of making even the most boring literature sound exciting. Sometimes she'd come home and tell me stories about her students, how they struggled, how they triumphed. It made me feel like I was part of something bigger just by being with her. But lately, there was this nagging feeling. It started small, like a tiny pebble in my shoe. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just paranoid. But then little things began to add up, like the way she'd suddenly get quiet when I walked into a room, or how she'd leave her phone face down on the table, something she never used to do. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I came home early. I wanted to surprise her with dinner. As I opened the door, I heard her voice from the living room. She was on the phone, and she sounded different, like someone I didn't recognize. "Yeah, I'll be there," she said, her tone hushed but urgent. "No, he's not home yet. I'll text you when I'm on my way." My heart pounded in my chest. Who was she talking to? And why did she sound so secretive? I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Should I confront her? Pretend I hadn't heard anything? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I decided to play it cool. I put on my best smile and called out, "Honey, I'm home." She jumped, startled, and quickly hung up the phone. "Oh, hey, I didn't hear you come in." I forced a laugh, trying to keep things light. "Busy day?" "Yeah, lots of grading," she replied, avoiding eye contact. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was she cheating on me? Could it really be happening? I mean, we weren't perfect, but we had a good thing going, didn't we? The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. I waited until she left for work, then checked her phone. It was password protected, of course, but I knew her passcode. Old habits die hard, right? There it was, plain as day, a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the usual spot." Same time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again. What was the usual spot? Who was this person? Questions swirled in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might find. As I sat there, staring at the screen, I realized something. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about trust. And once that's gone, can you ever really get it back? I had to figure out what to do next, but whatever path I chose, it wouldn't be easy. All right, so I had this message staring me in the face like some kind of twisted joke. "Meet me at the usual spot." Same time. What the hell was the usual spot? And who the hell was this mystery person? My mind raced through every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. Was it a coworker? A neighbor? Some random guy she met at the grocery store? I needed to find out more, but I knew I had to be smart about it. Confronting her directly would only lead to denial or, worse, an argument that might push her further away. No, I needed evidence, something concrete that would make it impossible for her to lie. So, I did what any self-respecting tech geek would do. I installed a tracking app on her phone. Yeah, I know, not exactly the most ethical move, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I justified it by telling myself that if she wasn't doing anything wrong, she'd have nothing to hide, right? The next few days were agonizing. Every time she left the house, I checked her location on my phone. She went to work, came home, and everything seemed normal. But then, one evening, she told me she was going to meet up with a friend from school. Nothing unusual there, except for the fact that she didn't specify which friend. I watched her location on the map as she drove to a cafe downtown, a place we used to go together when we first started dating. It was supposed to be our special spot, where we shared countless memories. My heart sank as I saw her park and walk inside. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to follow her. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, making sure to stay far enough behind her car so she wouldn't notice. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw her sitting at a table outside, sipping coffee. But she wasn't alone. There he was, a guy I didn't recognize. He looked younger than me, maybe mid-30s, dressed casually, but with that air of confidence that makes you want to punch someone in the face. They were laughing, talking animatedly. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. I sat in my car, watching them from a distance. What the hell was I supposed to do now? Walk up to them and confront them right there in public? That would be a disaster. So, I waited and waited. After what felt like hours, they finally got up and left. I followed her home, still reeling from what I'd seen. When she walked through the door, she greeted me with a smile, completely oblivious to my turmoil. "Hey, how was your day?" "Fine," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was yours?" "Oh, it was great." Met up with Sarah for coffee. We hadn't caught up in ages. Sarah? Really? I wanted to scream, to call her out right then and there. But I held back. I needed more proof. I couldn't just accuse her based on a hunch and some suspicious behavior. That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through her messages again. There was nothing new, no smoking gun. But then I noticed something odd. She had deleted several text conversations, leaving only fragments of earlier messages. Who deletes their texts unless they have something to hide? I decided to take a different approach. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day following her. This time, she went to a park near her school. She sat on a bench, reading a book. For a while, nothing happened. Just when I thought I'd made a mistake, he showed up again. The same guy from the cafe. They hugged briefly, then sat down together. This time I got closer. I pretended to jog past them, trying to overhear their conversation. All I caught was a snippet. "Can't keep doing this, Karen. It's too risky." My blood boiled. Too risky? What the hell did that mean? I stormed home, furious and confused. How could she do this to me? We had plans, dreams. We were supposed to grow old together, travel the world, have kids. And now, all of that felt like a cruel joke. As I paced around the living room, I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront her and risk losing her. Or worse, getting lied to. Or I could wait, gather more evidence, and plan my revenge. Because let's be honest, I wasn't going to let her get away with this without paying a price. But what kind of revenge? I wasn't the type to go all psycho ex-husband on her. No, I needed something creative, something that would hit her where it hurt. Something that would remind her of what she threw away. That night, I sat down on my computer and started brainstorming. I had skills, resources, and a whole lot of pent-up rage. Whatever I did, it had to be perfect. It had to leave her questioning every decision she'd ever made. And trust me, I was just getting started. All right, so I had my suspicions confirmed. Karen was cheating on me. That much was clear. But now what? Revenge wasn't just about making her pay. It was about making her feel the same gut-wrenching betrayal that I felt. And trust me, I had a lot of time to think about it. First things first, I needed more information. Who was this guy? What did they talk about when they thought no one was listening? I decided to dig deeper into his background. If he was going to be part of this mess, I needed to know everything about him. I started by asking around. I casually mentioned to Karen's coworkers that she'd been talking about a new friend from school. Most of them were clueless, but one of her colleagues, Mrs. Thompson, seemed to know something. "Oh, you mean that guy who volunteers at the school library?" she said, sipping her coffee. "He's a nice fellow. Helps out with the after-school reading program." Bingo. So Mr. Volunteer was the mystery man. Now I had a name to work with. I did some digging online and found out his full name, Jake Harrison. He was a freelance writer, apparently working on some kind of novel. Typical artsy type. Long hair, scruffy beard, probably thinks he's deep because he reads Bukowski. Armed with this new information, I started planning my revenge. But I didn't want to do anything illegal or overly dramatic. No, I wanted something subtle, something that would make her question everything she thought she knew about me and about herself. One evening, while Karen was grading papers in the study, I sat down on my computer and started coding. My job as a software engineer came in handy here. I created a simple app, a digital diary of sorts. It looked like an ordinary note-taking app, but it had a hidden feature. Every time she opened it, it would send me a notification with a screenshot of whatever she was writing. I installed it on her phone under the guise of helping her organize her lesson plans. She didn't suspect a thing. "Oh, this will be so helpful," she said, smiling. Little did she know. Over the next few days, I monitored her entries. Mostly it was mundane stuff, lesson plans, grocery lists, reminders to water the plants. But then one day I saw it, a single entry titled Jake. My heart skipped a beat as I read through it. Jake is different. He listens to me. He understands me. We talk for hours, and it feels like no time has passed. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I miss him when we're apart. Is this love? I slammed my fist on the desk. Love? Really? This was getting worse by the minute. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to hit her where it hurt. Her reputation. I started gathering evidence. Photos, messages, anything that could expose her affair. I wasn't going to blackmail her or anything crazy like that. No, I had a better idea. Something that would make her regret ever crossing me. One night, while Karen was asleep, I snuck into her office and copied all her teaching materials onto a USB drive. I also grabbed a few personal items. Photos, letters, mementos. I knew exactly what I was going to do with them. The next morning, I called in sick again. This time, I went to the school. I walked into the principal's office and asked to speak with him privately. He looked surprised but welcomed me in. "Mr. Anderson, what brings you here?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "I need to talk to you about Karen," I said, my voice steady. "She's been acting strange lately, and I'm worried about her mental state. She's been having issues." The principal raised an eyebrow. "Issues?" I nodded. "Yes. She's been struggling with depression and anxiety. I've tried to help her, but it's gotten worse. She's been seeing someone as student's parent, actually. I'm afraid it's affecting her judgment." His face darkened. "That's serious. Are you sure?" I pulled out the USB drive and handed it to him. "Here's proof. I've documented everything. I just want to make sure she gets the help she needs." He took the drive, his expression grim. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll look into it immediately." As I left the school, I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt. Was this too far? Maybe, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more trick up my sleeve. That evening, I hacked into Karen's social media accounts. I posted a series of cryptic messages, seemingly from her, that hinted at her infidelity. Nothing too explicit, just enough to raise eyebrows. I knew her friends would see them and start asking questions. By the time she got home, the damage was already done. Her phone was blowing up with messages from concerned friends and colleagues. She looked panicked as she scrolled through her notifications. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. I shrugged, playing it cool. "I don't know. Looks like your social media got hacked." She stared at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What if they find out?" I couldn't help but smirk. "Find out what?" She swallowed hard, realizing she'd slipped. "Nothing. Just nothing." But I knew it wasn't nothing. She was scared, and that was exactly what I wanted. She was starting to feel the weight of her actions, and I wasn't even close to being finished. As she retreated to the bedroom, I sat down and opened my laptop. Phase 2 of my plan was about to begin. I had gathered enough dirt on Jake to make his life miserable. But I wasn't going to stop there. I wanted to destroy both of them, slowly and methodically. And trust me, I had plenty of ideas. All right, so I had Karen on edge. Her social media accounts were blowing up with cryptic messages, and her colleagues were starting to whisper. But that wasn't enough. Not by a long shot. I needed to turn the screws tighter, make her feel the full weight of her betrayal. Jake was still the wild card in all this. He thought he was some kind of romantic hero, but I knew better. People like him always have skeletons in their closets, and it was time to dig them out. I started by creating a fake email account under Jake's name. Using information from his freelance writing gigs, I sent emails to various publishers and editors, subtly undermining his reputation. Nothing too obvious, just enough to plant seeds of doubt. One email read, "Hey, just wanted to let you know that I'm having second thoughts about submitting my manuscript. It's not ready yet, and I need more time to polish it." Another went to a potential client. "Apologies, but I won't be able to take on any new projects for the foreseeable future. Personal issues are taking precedence right now." I even reached out to a few literary agents, hinting at plagiarism concerns. "Just FYI, there might be some overlap between my work and another author's." I'm looking into it, but wanted to give you a heads up. Within days, Jake's inbox was flooded with replies asking for explanations. His career, which he probably thought was on the rise, was suddenly teetering on the edge. And the best part? He had no idea who was behind it. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Karen. She was becoming increasingly paranoid, constantly checking her phone and glancing nervously around every time someone mentioned her name. I could see the cracks forming, and it gave me a sick sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. I decided to escalate things further. One evening, while she was out with her friend Jake, I hacked into her school's internal messaging system. I crafted a message from the principal to her, detailing a meeting to discuss her recent behavior. The message read, "Karen, we've received some concerning reports about your conduct, both inside and outside the classroom. We need to meet to discuss these matters immediately. Please prepare any documentation or evidence you might have regarding your recent actions." I sent it from an anonymous email address, making sure it looked official. When she got home that night, she was visibly shaken. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. She hesitated, clearly torn between telling the truth and keeping up the charade. "The principal wants to meet with me tomorrow. Something about inappropriate behavior." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds serious. Do you know what it's about?" She shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know. I am scared, Tom. What if they find out?" I patted her on the back, trying to suppress a smirk. "Don't worry. We'll figure it out together." But deep down, I was reveling in her fear. She was starting to realize that her lies were catching up with her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next day, I followed her to the school. From a distance, I watched as she walked into the principal's office, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I couldn't hear what was said, but I knew it wouldn't be good. After about an hour, she emerged, pale and shaken. She barely acknowledged me as she drove home in silence. When she got home, she collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. "They're investigating me," she whispered. "They think I'm having an affair with a student's parent." I sat down beside her, pretending to be concerned. "Is it true?" She burst into tears, finally breaking down. "Yes, it's true. I am sorry, Tom. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely, and Jake, he made me feel alive again." Her words stung, but I kept my cool. "Lonely? You gotta be kidding me. We've been together for years. How could you throw that away for some guy you barely know?" She sobbed harder, unable to answer. I stood up, pacing the room. "You know what the worst part is? You didn't even try to hide it. You left breadcrumbs everywhere. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" She wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you." "Well, it's too late for that now," I snapped. "You've made your bed, Karen. Now you have to lie in it." But I wasn't done yet. I had one final card to play, something that would ensure she never forgot what she'd done. I had spent the past few weeks meticulously documenting everything. Every text, every photo, every suspicious activity. I compiled it all into a dossier, complete with dates, times, and locations. That night, I printed out the dossier and left it on the kitchen table. When she saw it the next morning, her face turned white as a sheet. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything," I replied coldly. "Every piece of evidence I've gathered over the past few months. Your affair, your lies, your deceit. It's all there." She flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. "What are you going to do with this?" I smiled, though it felt more like a grimace. "Nothing. For now. But you should know that I can destroy you with this. Your job, your reputation, everything. All it takes is one phone call." She dropped the dossier, backing away from me. "Please, Tom, don't do this." I crossed my arms, standing firm. "Why shouldn't I? You've already destroyed our marriage. Why should I show you any mercy?" She sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the pain she'd caused, the trust she'd shattered. No, she didn't deserve my pity. "You can leave now," I said quietly. "Pack your bags and go. I don't want to see you here ever again." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with despair. "Where will I go?" "I don't care," I replied, turning away. "That's your problem, not mine." As she gathered her things and left, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. It was over. Our marriage was officially dead, and I had made sure she paid the price. But as I stood there in the empty house, I realized something. Revenge wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Sure, I had exposed her lies and ruined her life, but in doing so, I had also destroyed myself. The house felt eerily quiet after Karen left. It was as if the walls themselves were mourning the loss of something that had once been full of life and laughter. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where she used to sit, her favorite mug still resting on the coffee table. The silence was deafening, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. I had done what I set out to do. I had exacted my revenge, exposed her lies, and driven her away. But now, sitting in the aftermath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Sure, I had won this battle, but at what cost? Days passed, and I found myself falling into a routine again, albeit a different one. No more shared meals, no more late-night conversations about our dreams and aspirations. Just me, alone with my thoughts and the lingering bitterness that refused to fade. Work became my escape. I threw myself into coding projects, staying late at the office to avoid the emptiness at home. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but didn't pry too much. They knew better than to ask about personal matters, especially when you're the guy who just went through a messy breakup, or whatever you want to call it. One evening, while working late, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? I opened the email, half expecting some sort of threat or blackmail. Instead, it was from Jake. "Tom, we need to talk. This has gone far enough. Meet me at the park near your house tomorrow at noon. Come alone." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What did he want? Did he know about my little schemes? Was he planning to confront me? Or worse, was he planning to retaliate? Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go. If nothing else, it would give me a chance to see the man who had taken everything from me face to face. The next day, I arrived at the park a few minutes early. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, leaves crunching underfoot as I walked toward the bench where we were supposed to meet. Jake was already there, looking nervous and fidgety. He stood up when he saw me approaching. "Tom," he said, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming." I ignored the handshake and sat down on the bench. "What do you want?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I know things have gotten out of hand. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't plan on falling for Karen, but it happened, and I'm sorry." I snorted. That's all you've got?" He shook his head. "No, it's not. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want to make things right. I've seen how much pain this has caused you, and I feel responsible." I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. "Responsible? You think you can just apologize and everything will be okay? You destroyed my marriage, my trust, everything I believed in." Jake looked genuinely remorseful. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought maybe Karen and I could have something real. But now, seeing the damage it's caused, I realize it was a mistake." I studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. He seemed genuine, but then again, so had Karen before everything fell apart. "So, what now? Are you here to ask for forgiveness?" He hesitated. "Not exactly. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I do want to offer you something in return. A way to move forward." I raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains all the evidence you need to clear Karen's name at school. I've written a letter explaining everything. How it was my fault, how she tried to end things, but I pushed her to continue. If you give this to the principal, they'll drop the investigation." I stared at the USB drive, unsure of what to say. "Why are you doing this?" He looked down at his feet. "Because I owe it to both of you. I messed up, and I need to fix it. Whether you choose to use this is up to you, but I wanted to give you the option." I took the USB drive from him, turning it over in my hands. "And what about you? What happens to you?" He shrugged. "I'll deal with the consequences. Maybe I'll leave town, start over somewhere new. but I needed to come clean first. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. I wasn't sure what to think. On one hand, Jake was offering me a way to salvage what little remained of Karen's reputation. On the other hand, part of me wanted to hold on to the evidence, to keep her suffering as long as possible. "I'll think about it," I finally said, standing up. "But don't expect me to thank you." Jake nodded, standing as well. "I understand. Take care, Tom." As he walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, confusion. It was all swirling inside me, making it hard to focus. I had spent so long plotting my revenge, but now that I had the means to undo some of the damage, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. When I got home, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and read through the documents Jake had provided. They were thorough, detailed, and honest. If I gave them to the principal, Karen's career would be saved. But would it be worth it? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The decision weighed heavily on my mind. Part of me wanted to destroy her completely, to make sure she paid for every lie and every betrayal. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I had fallen in love with, wanted to let her off the hook, even if just a little. In the end, it came down to one question. Could I forgive her? Not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to the anger and resentment was eating away at me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it up. The next morning, I made my decision. I printed out Jake's documents and drove to the school. The principal's office was quiet when I walked in, the tension palpable. "I need to show you something," I said, handing him the folder. He scanned through the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention." As I left the school, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly didn't erase the pain, but it was a step toward moving on. Karen might never fully understand the depth of what she had done, but at least she wouldn't lose her job because of it. A few days later, I received a text from Karen. It was short and to the point. "Thank you." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Our story had ended, and no amount of words could change that. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The days following my decision to clear Karen's name were a blur. I threw myself into work, hoping that the relentless pace of coding and problem-solving would help me forget the emotional turmoil I was going through. But no matter how many lines of code I wrote or how late I stayed at the office, the memories kept creeping back in. One evening, as I sat alone in our now empty house, I realized something important. I needed to start rebuilding my life. Revenge had given me a temporary sense of control, but it wasn't enough to fill the void left by Karen's betrayal. I needed to find a new purpose, something that would give me meaning beyond the anger and hurt. I started small. First, I cleaned out the house. Every item that reminded me of her went into boxes, photos, mementos, even some of her clothes that she had left behind. It felt cathartic, like I was physically removing her from my life. The house looked bare afterward, but it also felt lighter, as if the weight of her absence had been lifted. Next, I focused on reconnecting with old friends. Over the years, Karen and I had become somewhat insular, spending most of our free time together. Now, I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in ages, college buddies, former colleagues, even a few distant relatives. They were all surprised to hear from me, but they welcomed me back with open arms. One of those friends was Mike, a guy I'd known since high school. We used to hang out all the time, but once I got married, we drifted apart. He invited me to join him at his weekly poker night, and despite my initial reluctance, I agreed. The first night I showed up, I was nervous. What if they asked about Karen? What if they pitted me? But as soon as I walked in, I realized how much I had missed this, just hanging out with guys who didn't know or care about my personal drama. We played cards, drank beer, and laughed until the early hours of the morning. For the first time in months, I felt normal again. Mike noticed the change in me. "You're looking better, man," he said one night after everyone else had left. "What happened?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But then I figured, why not? "Karen cheated on me," I admitted. "It's been rough, but I'm trying to move on." He nodded sympathetically. "That sucks, man, but you're doing the right thing. You can't let her actions define your future." His words stuck with me. Moving on wasn't just about getting over Karen. It was about reclaiming my identity, finding joy in things that had nothing to do with her or the pain she had caused. With that in mind, I decided to take up a hobby I had long neglected: photography. In college, I had been passionate about capturing moments through a lens, but somewhere along the way, I had lost touch with that part of myself. I dusted off my old camera and started taking weekend trips to nearby parks and nature reserves, snapping photos of everything from sunsets to wildlife. There was something therapeutic about focusing on the beauty around me instead of dwelling on the past. Each photograph felt like a small victory, a reminder that there was still so much good in the world. I even started sharing my photos online, and to my surprise, people responded positively. Friends and strangers alike commented on how stunning the images were, offering encouragement and support. As weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes within myself. I was sleeping better, eating healthier, and even laughing more often. The constant knot of tension in my chest loosened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely. But just when I thought I was finally starting to heal, life threw me another curveball. One afternoon, while I was at work, I received an unexpected call from my lawyer. "Tom, we need to talk," he said, his voice serious. "There's been a development regarding your divorce proceedings." My heart sank. Divorce. I hadn't wanted to think about it, but deep down, I knew it was inevitable. "What kind of development?" I asked, bracing myself for bad news. "There's a discrepancy in the financial disclosures," he explained. "Karen has claimed that certain assets belong solely to her, which isn't accurate according to our records. This could complicate things significantly." I sighed, rubbing my temples. Of course, there was more drama. Just when I thought I was getting my life back on track, here came another obstacle. "What do we do now?" "We'll need to gather evidence to prove joint ownership," he replied. "It might take some time, but we'll get through it. Don't worry, Tom. We handled this." Easier said than done. The thought of going through another round of legal battles made my stomach churn, but I couldn't afford to let it derail my progress. I had come too far to fall back into the abyss of bitterness and resentment. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my lawyer to gather the necessary documentation. It was tedious and frustrating, but I refused to let it consume me. Instead, I channeled my frustration into my photography and social activities, finding solace in creative outlets and friendships. During this time, I also started seeing a woman named Sarah. We met at a local art gallery where I had displayed some of my photographs. She was kind, intelligent, and most importantly, she didn't judge me for my past. Our relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect and shared interests rather than desperation or loneliness. Sarah became a source of comfort and stability during a tumultuous period. She listened without judgment whenever I needed to vent about the divorce or reminisce about happier times. With her, I felt like I could be myself again, flaws and all. One evening, as we sat together on my porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and asked, "Are you okay with everything that's happening?" I paused, considering her question. Honestly, no, not entirely. But I'm learning to cope. It's a process, and I'm taking it one day at a time. She smiled softly, squeezing my hand. That's all anyone can ask for. And remember, you don't have to go through it alone. Her words resonated deeply. For so long, I had isolated myself, convinced that no one could understand what I was going through. But here was someone willing to stand by me, offering support without expecting anything in return. As the weeks passed, I found myself growing stronger, both emotionally and mentally. The legal issues eventually resolved themselves, thanks to diligent work from my lawyer and the evidence we gathered. The divorce was finalized, and although it was bittersweet, it also marked the end of a painful chapter in my life. With closure came a newfound sense of freedom. I no longer felt tethered to the past, haunted by the ghost of what could have been. Instead, I looked forward to the future, filled with possibilities and potential. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to embrace it fully. Life had started to feel almost normal again. I was back in a routine, balancing work, photography, and my budding relationship with Sarah. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the memories of Karen would resurface, but they no longer crippled me. I had learned to compartmentalize, to acknowledge the pain without letting it define me. One crisp autumn morning, I decided to take a break from my usual routine and head out for a hike. The air was cool, and the trees were ablaze with colors, making it the perfect day for some solitude and reflection. As I walked along the trail, camera in hand, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. But as I rounded a bend, I saw someone standing by the side of the path. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but something about the figure seemed familiar. My heart skipped a beat as I realized who it was. Karen. She looked different, thinner, her face drawn, but unmistakably her. She turned as she heard me approach, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She took a deep breath, her eyes avoiding mine. "I needed to see you, Tom. I've been thinking about everything, and I wanted to apologize." I crossed my arms, trying to maintain my composure. "Apologies don't change what happened." "I know," she said softly, "but I needed to say it anyway. I've been through hell these past few months. Losing you, losing everything, it's been a nightmare. And I realize now how much I messed up." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the pain she had caused. Why now? Why come here after all this time? She hesitated, her eyes finally meeting mine. "Because I've been alone. Jake, he left town. He couldn't handle the fallout. And I've had nothing but time to think about my mistakes. I miss you, Tom. I miss us." The sincerity in her voice was unsettling. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive and move on. But another part, the part that had spent months rebuilding, wasn't ready to let go of the anger and hurt. "I can't just forget what happened," I said firmly. "You destroyed our marriage, our trust. That's not something you can fix with an apology." Karen nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed to tell you how sorry I am. And maybe give us both some closure." Closure. The word echoed in my mind. Was that what I needed? Could seeing her, hearing her apology, really bring me the closure I'd been searching for? We stood there in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. Finally, I spoke. "What do you want from me, Karen?" She wiped away a tear, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing. I just needed to say it, to make sure you knew how much I regret everything." I sighed, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. "Okay, I heard you, but that doesn't change anything. We're done, Karen. There's no going back." She nodded, her expression resigned. "I know. Thank you for listening." Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the woods. I watched her go, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, anger, sadness. They all coexisted in that moment, leaving me more confused than ever. As I continued my hike, I tried to process what had just happened. Karen's appearance had thrown me off balance, dredging up feelings I thought I had buried. But as I reached the summit and looked out over the breathtaking view, I realized something important. Her visit hadn't changed anything. It hadn't undone the healing I had worked so hard to achieve. By the time I got home, I felt more resolved than ever. Whatever lingering doubts or unresolved feelings I had were slowly fading. Karen's apology might have given her some semblance of closure, but for me, the real closure came from moving forward, from building a new life that didn't revolve around her. That evening, Sarah called to check in. "How was your hike?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. "It was good," I replied, smiling despite myself. "A bit unexpected, but good." "Unexpected?" she prodded gently. I hesitated, wondering if I should share what had happened. But then I decided that keeping secrets wouldn't help either of us. Karen showed up while I was hiking. She wanted to apologize. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprising even myself with the honesty of my answer. It was weird, but I think it helped. I needed to hear it, even if it didn't change anything. Sarah's voice softened. "You're stronger than you think, Tom. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. Maybe I was stronger. Maybe I had finally found the strength to let go of the past and embrace the future. But just when I thought I could put everything behind me, life had one more twist in store. A few days later, I received a package in the mail. It was addressed to me, but there was no return address. Curious, I opened it carefully. Inside was a small, worn leather journal. Flipping through the pages, I realized it was Karen's diary, a personal account of her thoughts and feelings during our marriage and the affair. My heart raced as I read through the entries. Some were mundane, detailing her daily routines and teaching experiences. Others were deeply personal, revealing the inner turmoil she had been experiencing. She wrote about feeling trapped, unfulfilled, and desperate for something more. But it was the final entry that stopped me cold. Tom, if you're reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to leave. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you once, and I always will. But I couldn't keep living a lie. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. This is my way of saying goodbye. I sat there, staring at the last page, my mind racing. What did this mean? Had she left town for good? Was this her final act of closure? Before I could process it fully, my phone rang. It was Mike. "Hey man, you need to come down to the hospital," he said, his voice urgent. "It's Karen. She's been in an accident." My blood ran cold. What? Is she okay? They're not sure yet. She was brought in unconscious. They're running tests now. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity, every second stretching into minutes as my mind raced with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the waiting room was filled with anxious faces. I spotted Mike sitting in a corner, looking worried. "What happened?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. "She was hit by a car," he explained. "They found her journal near the scene. Someone must have seen her drop it and brought it to you." I sank into a chair, my hands trembling. "Is she going to be okay?" "They're doing everything they can," he said quietly. "But it's touch and go." Time seemed to blur as we waited for news. Hours passed, each one dragging by slower than the last. Finally, a doctor emerged from the emergency room, her expression grim. "Mr. Anderson?" she asked, approaching me. "Yes, that's me," I replied, standing up. "She's stable for now, but she's in a coma. We won't know more until she wakes up. If she wakes up." My heart sank. This was supposed to be over. I had moved on, found peace. But now, faced with the possibility of losing her forever, I realized something profound. No matter how much I had healed, no matter how much time had passed, Karen would always be a part of my story. And as I sat there, waiting for any sign of life from the woman who had shattered my world, I couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the end, or just another beginning? The waiting room of the hospital was a sterile, fluorescent-lit space filled with the quiet hum of anxiety. Families huddled together, whispering prayers and exchanging worried glances. I sat in one corner, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Karen's journal lay on my lap, its worn leather cover a stark reminder of the life we once shared. Mike stayed by my side, offering silent support. He didn't ask questions or try to offer platitudes. He just sat there, a steady presence amidst the chaos. Every now and then, he'd glance over at me, his eyes filled with concern, but he knew better than to break the silence. Hours passed, each one stretching into an eternity. Nurses came and went, their faces neutral masks that offered little comfort. Finally, the doctor returned, her expression still grim. "Her condition is stable for now," she said, her voice measured. "But she's in a medically induced coma to reduce swelling in her brain. We won't know more until she regains consciousness." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that she wasn't gone yet, but dread at the uncertainty of what lay ahead. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "For a few minutes, but only one visitor at a time. She needs rest." I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. Mike gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder before I walked down the hallway toward Karen's room. The door creaked open, revealing her lying motionless on the bed, hooked up to various machines that beeped rhythmically. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her chest rose and fell with the mechanical precision of the ventilator. I pulled a chair close to her bedside, sitting down and taking her hand in mine. It felt cold and fragile like porcelain. Memories flooded back. Our first date, our wedding day, the countless nights we spent talking about our dreams. How had it all come to this? Karen, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to say something. I've been so angry, so hurt. But seeing you like this, it makes everything feel different. I never wanted it to end like this. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I read your journal. I know you were struggling, that you felt trapped. Maybe I could have done more to help. Maybe I should have seen the signs. But we both made mistakes, and now we're paying for them. I paused, squeezing her hand gently. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if you'll wake up, or if this is goodbye. But I want you to know that despite everything, I still care about you. And I hope, wherever you are, you can find some peace. As I sat there, holding her hand, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or forgetting the pain. It was about letting go of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. Whether Karen woke up or not, I needed to forgive her, not for her sake but for mine. After a few more minutes, I reluctantly let go of her hand and left the room. Mike was waiting outside, his expression sympathetic. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's surreal. 1 minute, I'm moving on, and the next, I'm back here, facing everything I thought I'd left behind." He nodded. "Sometimes, life throws curveballs when you least expect them, but you've handled it better than most people would have." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. What do I do now? Wait here and hope she wakes up? Or go back to my life and pretend this never happened? Mike shrugged. "There's no right answer. You do what feels right for you. If staying here helps you find closure, then stay. If walking away is what you need, then walk away. Either way, you've got friends who will support you." His words gave me something to think about. For the first time since Karen's accident, I allowed myself to consider my options. Staying at the hospital meant facing the emotional turmoil head-on, confronting the unresolved feelings I still harbored. Walking away meant accepting that some things couldn't be fixed and focusing on my future. Over the next few days, I found myself torn between these two paths. Each morning, I visited Karen, sitting by her bedside and talking to her, even though I wasn't sure if she could hear me. I told her stories from my childhood, shared memories of our happier times, and expressed my hopes for her recovery. It felt therapeutic, like I was unburdening myself of the weight I had carried for so long. Meanwhile, Sarah remained a constant source of support. She visited whenever she could, bringing food and offering a listening ear. She never pushed me to make any decisions, understanding that this was a deeply personal journey. One evening, after another long day at the hospital, Sarah and I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. She took my hand, her touch warm and comforting. "You've been doing so much for Karen," she said softly. "But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. This isn't easy for you, and it's okay to feel conflicted." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I know. It's just, I keep thinking about what happens next. If she wakes up, will things go back to how they were? Or will we both move on?" Sarah squeezed my hand gently. "You can't control what happens, Tom. All you can do is be present in the moment and make the best choices for yourself. Whatever happens, I'm here for you." Her words resonated deeply. I couldn't predict the future, and trying to control every outcome was futile. All I could do was focus on the present and trust that I would make the right decisions when the time came. A week later, the doctor called me into her office. "We're reducing the sedatives," she explained. "If Karen responds well, she may regain consciousness soon." My heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. "And if she doesn't?" The doctor's expression softened. "We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. For now, let's focus on the positive. There's a chance she'll wake up." That night, I sat by Karen's bedside, holding her hand and praying silently. Hours passed, the rhythmic beeping of the machines the only sound in the room. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed a flicker of movement, a slight twitch of her fingers. "Karen," I whispered, leaning closer. Can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered, and slowly, she opened her eyes. They were unfocused at first, but then they locked onto mine. A tear rolled down her cheek as she mouthed a single word, Tom. Relief washed over me, followed by a wave of emotion. I'm here, I said, my voice breaking. I'm here. Over the next few days, Karen's condition improved steadily. She regained full consciousness and began the slow process of recovery. During her waking moments, we talked about the past, about the present, and about what the future might hold. One afternoon, as she lay in bed, looking more like herself than she had in months, she turned to me. Thank you for being here, she said softly. I didn't expect you to come. I smiled faintly. I didn't either. But here we are. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. Do you think we can ever fix this? Can we ever go back to how things were? I shook my head. No, Karen. We can't go back. Too much has changed. But maybe we can find a way to move forward, to heal in our own ways. She nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. I understand. Thank you for giving me a second chance. As I left the hospital that evening, I felt a sense of closure unlike anything I had experienced before. Karen and I weren't going to rekindle our relationship, but we had reached a place of mutual understanding and acceptance. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing her actions. It was about releasing the burden of anger and resentment that had weighed me down for so long. Walking home under the starlit sky, I realized that I had finally found peace. Life had thrown me one last twist, but I had navigated it with grace and resilience. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. The weeks following Karen's recovery were a blur of emotions and realizations. Each day brought new insights, and I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The anger and hurt that had once consumed me were slowly fading, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. Karen's recovery was steady but slow. She spent more time at home now, focusing on physical therapy and emotional healing. We kept in touch occasionally, exchanging brief messages or meeting for coffee. Our conversations were cordial, sometimes even friendly, but there was an unspoken understanding that we were moving on, separately. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, I pulled out my journal and began writing. It wasn't something I did often, but lately I found solace in putting my thoughts down on paper. The act of writing helped me process everything that had happened, giving me a chance to reflect on the lessons learned. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past or pretending that the pain never existed. It's about acknowledging the hurt, accepting it, and then letting it go. Holding on to anger only serves to keep you trapped in a cycle of negativity. By forgiving Karen, I freed myself from the burden of resentment. It didn't mean what she did was okay. It meant that I chose not to let her actions define my future. During the darkest moments of my journey, I neglected my own well-being. I threw myself into work and distractions, hoping they would numb the pain. But true healing comes from within. Taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically is crucial. Whether it's through hobbies like photography, spending time with friends, or simply taking a walk in nature, self-care is essential for recovery. Karen's betrayal shattered my trust, but it also opened my eyes to the importance of genuine connections. Reconnecting with old friends and forming new relationships helped me regain a sense of belonging. Sarah, in particular, became a cornerstone of support. Her patience, understanding, and unwavering presence reminded me that love and trust can be rebuilt, albeit in different forms. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns. Sometimes, these changes are painful, but they also offer opportunities for growth. Moving forward required me to embrace the uncertainty and trust that I could navigate whatever came my way. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for personal development. As I closed my journal, I felt a renewed sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. With a clearer mind and a lighter heart, I began to focus on building a new chapter in my life. One weekend, Sarah suggested we take a trip to the coast. It had been a while since we'd taken any time off, and I welcomed the idea of getting away from the familiar surroundings. The drive along the scenic route was breathtaking, the ocean views providing a much-needed change of scenery. We rented a cozy cabin near the beach, its rustic charm offering a perfect retreat from the hustle and bustle of daily life. The first morning, we woke up early to catch the sunrise. As we stood on the shore, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you for bringing me here," I said, turning to Sarah. "It's exactly what I needed." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the early morning light. "I'm glad you're enjoying it. You deserve some peace after everything you've been through." We spent the days exploring the coastline, taking long walks, and capturing the beauty of nature through my camera lens. In the evenings, we cooked meals together, sharing stories and laughter. It was simple, yet deeply fulfilling. On our last night, as we sat by the fireplace, Sarah turned to me with a serious expression. "Tom, I've been thinking about us. Where do you see this going?" Her question caught me off guard, but deep down I knew the answer. "I've thought about it too," I admitted, "and I know I want to be with you. You've been my rock through everything, and I can't imagine my life without you." She took my hand, her eyes filled with emotion. "I feel the same way, but I also understand if you need more time. Healing takes time, and I don't want to rush you." I squeezed her hand gently. "You're right. Healing does take time, but I'm ready to move forward with you by my side. Let's take things one step at a time, but together." Her smile widened, and she leaned in to kiss me. Together sounds perfect. The trip marked a significant milestone in our relationship. It was a reminder that while the past couldn't be changed, the future was ours to shape. With Sarah's support and my newfound sense of purpose, I felt equipped to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. Back home, I continued to focus on my personal growth. I enrolled in a photography course, eager to refine my skills and explore new creative avenues. The class introduced me to a community of like-minded individuals who shared my passion for capturing life's fleeting moments. Through them, I discovered new perspectives and techniques, further fueling my love for the art. Work remained a constant in my life, but I approached it with renewed energy. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on how much more engaged and motivated I seemed. I even started mentoring a junior developer, passing on the knowledge and experience I had gained over the years. One afternoon, as I was reviewing some code, I received an email from an old friend who worked for a tech startup. They were looking for someone with my expertise to lead a new project, and he thought I might be interested. The opportunity intrigued me. It offered a chance to step outside my comfort zone and take on a leadership role. After careful consideration, I decided to apply. The interview process was rigorous, but I felt confident in my abilities. When the offer came through, I accepted without hesitation. It was a bold move, but one that aligned with my goals of continuous growth and learning. As I settled into my new role, I reflected on how far I had come. From the depths of despair to the heights of new beginnings, the journey had been transformative. Life had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also shown me the strength and resilience I possessed. One evening, as I sat in my new office, gazing out at the city skyline, I realized something important. Healing isn't linear. There will always be setbacks and challenges, but with each obstacle overcome, I grew stronger. And perhaps most importantly, I learned to cherish the present moment, knowing that it's all we truly have. With a deep breath, I turned back to my desk, ready to tackle the next challenge. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead.